got baptized by a streetcar. What's up, guys? So we've got a special video planned today. We're up at my grandparents' house and we're going to do an interview, and we're going to show you guys how we got started into racing and how this all began. To really do it right, we're going to start with my grandpa and his 55 Chevy. So we're going to go talk to him.
Aluminum place in Newark, and he was working a machine shop, and he was buying and selling cars to make ends meet, and he'd had several over there that he brought in and fixed up and turned around and sold. And one morning I heard a car pull in over there about 8 o'clock, and had a different exhaust sound to it, so I looked out to see what he'd bought now. And it was a blue 55 Bel Air 2-door sedan. I asked him if he's going to sell that, and he says, "Oh, I'm going to hang on to this one." That's what he always said. So he played with it for a while and put new shocks on it, cleaned it up, and did some stuff to it. He had it for about a month, and the novelty started to wear off. He was looking for something else, and he finally put a price on the car. And when he did that, he was standing there in front of his dad, and I didn't have the money to buy it, but I said, "Just give me a week to come up with it." So he said, "All right." So I had a 51 Ford pickup, and I sold that. We had a 64 Chevelle Super Sport. I sold that. And I borrowed $250 from Mom and Dad. So I finally had all the cash gathered up. I went over to see him, and he said, "Oh, I changed my mind. I don't want to sell it now." And I said, "Damn it, Don, I sold our everyday car. I sold the pickup truck, and I borrowed money, so I come up with the money to buy the 55. And I was kind of upset with him. And his dad came out of the office, and took him by the arm, took him back in the shop. Pretty soon they came back, and Don said, well, I did tell you that I'd sell it to you for $850, so I'll go ahead and sell it to you. His old man took him back there and raised hell because he made a promise to do something, and then he was reneging on it. And the old man wasn't going to put up with that. So that's how I got it bought. But that's all we had. It was an everyday car. We were living up on Broadway at the time, so I could ride bicycle to work. Wasn't any big deal. But when we moved back out here, that was the only car we had, was a 55. I had no pickup truck, no trailer, no nothing. I just had the 55.
Did you ever street race?
A couple times. Drove it into Reynoldsburg one night. I had two of my cousins with me, all three of us in the front seat. And we left Reynoldsburg on 40 and we go back out to Mink Street. We turned off 40 and went north on Mink Street. And we got to a straight place. This guy pulled up beside me. And we both turned it loose. I don't know what he had. He had an Impala, I think. 63 Impala. But he couldn't get around me. And we came to the intersection of Refugee Road and Mink. At that time, there was a hump in Mink Street where Refugee went across. And we hit that hump, and 55 went airborne. We came down straight. But I looked over at my cousin, the youngest one, and he had the bench seat in his hands, and he had the seat all scrunched up. He was holding on so tight, and his eyes were big as bowling balls. We messed around in Newark a little bit, but nothing serious down there. I'd run the 55 up to like 3,000 in first gear and then hit the two dumps. And when you hit the two dumps of tri-power, it would really rear the car back when it took off. And your dad would stand on the transmission hump holding on to the seat, and he'd tell me to go zoom. So I'd take it up to about 3, and then I'd dump the other two carburetors. He couldn't hang on. It'd tear him loose from the seat and he'd fall into the back seat. He thought that was great. He's all the time telling me to go zoom. Every time I took off, he wanted to go zoom. I can't do that in the middle of town.
That's how it started.
Yeah, that's how he started for him, I think, and he loved to go zoom.
Short block, it's a 355 flat top piston. It's just stock rod, stock crank and everything, stock bottom end, but it's got aluminum heads on it and it's got a cam in it.
Oh, okay.
But
this car's never had anything like that. The newest engine this has ever had was a 64 327.
yeah.
See, the body number starts with F.
Mm-hmm.
That's the assembly plant. F stood for Flint, Michigan. So it came out of the Flint, Michigan plant. Now this thing was originally a 6-cylinder 3-speed on a column. And the 6-cylinder radiator mount, the 6-cylinder radiator set out here because it was so long. And at some point I found a V8 core support, and I think Joe gave me that V8 radiator. It's never had an alternator on it. The 55s with factory power steering. The power steering pump was mounted back here on the back of the generator. Generator had a shaft that come clear out the back, and the pump was on here. And this has still got the vacuum wiper on it. I couldn't put the electric wiper motor on because it hits the carburetor. So I had to leave the vacuum on there. Vacuum's a pain in the ass. It's still got the front motor mounts on it.
That's what I was looking at.
Yep.
Memorial Day weekend, first round, Pacemakers.
When I was little, my dad had a bunch of cars, but the main one that got my interest was a 55 Chevy. And I used to ride with Mom and Dad, and I'd stand on the drive shaft hump behind the front bench seats. And the 55 was a 327 4-speed. It had a tri-power on it, and Dad used to take us for rides in the car, and he'd get it rolling in low gear and bring it up about 3,000 RPM, and I'd tell Dad, go zoom, go zoom. And he'd kick that tri-power open, and I'd fall in the back seat. I couldn't hang on. Yeah, that's what got me. The first car I ever took down the track was a 1971 Nova that I bought on my school bus route. It was a pea green with dark green interior, and it sat over here on Gale Road. And every day we'd go past there on school bus, and that old Nova would sit there. It was just a stock 6-cylinder power glide car, stock black wheels, 14-inch tires on it. But just remember every day I'd see it. It's just sitting there, it never moves. And I got my first job at the pizza shop down in Granville. It used to be a Chevrolet dealer. I can't think of the name of that. Elms Pizza. I got my first job at Elms Pizza, and I saved up $150. And I went down there, and that guy sold me the car for $150. And I was, I think, 15 years old. I didn't even have a driver's license. Mom and Dad used to drive me to Elms and drop me off and then come pick me up after work. And bought that Nova and took it home. And I couldn't drive. I didn't have a license, but I'd drive up and down the driveway at Mom and Dad's. Their driveway was about 1/8 of a mile long. I just drive that old Nova up and down the driveway. But that was my first car. The 71 that I have now, a few years later, your mom and I were together, and she had a 78 Malibu. It was a mint, original, rust-free, original paint, original interior, original engine, transmission, 305 automatic with air, baby blue with a baby blue interior Malibu. And right next to the elementary school, there's a concrete block building, and it used to be the bus garage years and years ago. And at that time, the garage was pretty dilapidated. It had, I think, 3 large overhead doors. And at the far end of the garage, the one overhead door had come off the track, and it was stuck halfway down. So it wouldn't close, and you could see in the garage. And if you drove real slow and you looked between the houses, you could see that old garage out back, and there was a 71 Nova sitting in there. You could just see the taillights. And I don't know. It was in there for quite a few years, and I happened to stop by there one day and talk to the guy that owned it and asked him if he'd be interested in trading that 78 Malibu even up for the Nova as a roller. And he said he would. He said, I'll get it started, we'll get it outside and take a look at it. So I came back a few days later and brought the Malibu, and somebody had really done a number on it. They put a 4-speed in it. It was originally a V8 turbo 350 car with air conditioning, and someone put pedals in it, put a 4-speed in it, put air shocks on the back, and they'd been out just beating the hell out of this thing. Come here, June. Come here. They'd been beating the hell out of it. The front end was wore out so bad that you couldn't safely drive it hardly. But he got it fired up and took it up the road, and we went out to Creek Road out past the old Boy Scout cabin. He turned that thing loose, and it had like a 273 gear, and at 6,500 RPM, it was going like 70 miles an hour in first. And he pulled second gear and just scared me to death because the steering and the front end was wore out so bad, it looked like a galleon road grader. The front wheels were all laid in. And come here. It was scary. I told him, I said, just let out of it. I don't care what it rides like or drives like. I'll take it. Just take it home, pull a motor and transmission out of it. I'll take it. So he did, and I traded him that Malibu turnkey for the Nova rolling. The Nova was really pretty solid. Still had its original paint. It had a bullet hole in the driver's side front fender, and someone had wrecked it and hit a signpost and tore up the passenger side fender, and it had cats living in it. The windows had been left down for years and had animals living in it. It had newspapers and stuff as high as the back of the bench seat. But it was fairly solid, and so I brought it home, and me and some buddies put it in the shop and started working on it and put some sheet metal on it. We had to replace a passenger side front fender, and I had my 283 out of my original car. And actually the original car that I had, my grandfather used to have a bubble balancer, and I would go, the front end on my original car was wore out so bad it'd wear tires out in about 20,000 miles. So I was in high school when I used to go to all the tire shops and look in the dumpsters or behind the tire shops for used tires that they were throwing away. And if I could find a decent pair of 15-inch front tires that matched, I'd bring them home, and my grandpa and me would break them down by hand and remount them, air them up, and then he would balance them for me on a bubble balancer. And Grandpa said to me one day, he's like, why don't you just fix the front end in this car instead of you chewing tires up? I said, well, I don't have money, Grandpa. It's a bunch of money for front end parts. I don't have that kind of money. So Grandpa loaned me, I think it was $500. And I went to Napa and bought upper and lower ball joints, control arm bushings, shocks, springs, idler arm, pitman arms, everything. Everything in the front end we bought new, and Dad helped me put it all in out at the shop up the farm. So that original subframe I kept because it was all new parts. It was good. So when I got my Nova that I've got now, I took a subframe out of it and switched subframes. So the subframe that's in the car now is the original subframe to the car that I had when I was in high school. But we painted that car. Originally, we painted it maroon. And I don't know what happened with the paint, but the paint just never set up. It just kept shrinking down. And I wasn't happy with it. So a year or two later, me and Casey Crawford sanded it down again and painted it black. And it was black for a long time. I raced it for quite a while when it was black. And I came home from the track one day and it was raining. And I didn't want to worry about unloading the car, so I backed the trailer in this garage right here where you're sitting, and there was a cherry picker hanging out. The arm for the cherry picker was hanging out, and I couldn't see it in the mirror. And the cherry picker went right up the quarter panel and put a crease in the quarter panel and tore the paint up. And so when that happened, we painted it one more time, and I decided I didn't want to keep it black because black was so hard to keep clean. So we painted it that 96 Ford pickup laser red. That's what's on it now. I don't remember what year that was. It was 94, 95 maybe. 96, somewhere in there. That's the last time it was painted. I won a lot of races with that car, but I think my favorite thing in the world was watching you win Super Pro with it at Pacemakers that night. That meant more to me than any of my days racing. I'll never forget that.
You're the shiznit, Daddy.
Good job. Okay, let's take her. He's irritated. Good job, Daddy.
So I got interested in drag racing at an early age. I remember going to Pacemakers. It was a local track in Mount Vernon. We'd go out there and my dad would be racing his Nova. He has a 71 Nova that he went out there, and I remember watching him in the stands and hearing his name over the PA, and it was always just a good feeling being out there and watching. Out there in the summer, it was just a lot of fun. There was nothing like Pacemakers on a summer night. Just the cars and the smell and the announcer and everything. It was just, I don't know, it was just a good time to be out there as a kid. I would ride my bike around the pits and go up and down and look at all the cars. And my dad, he had a way of making people mad. I remember he would always find a way to get under people's skin, and I didn't really pick up that side of it, but I did pick up the competitive side. And I really enjoyed watching him race growing up, and I loved seeing his Nova. His Nova was one of a kind. It had a sound of its own. Nobody else's car had the same sound or the same burnout technique. It was It was just a really cool car. It was a really cool experience for me growing up, watching him race and watching him win. He won a lot of races when I was younger. As I got older and he focused on us kids more, he wasn't as competitive. He kind of lost his drive a little bit for him to race, and wanted us to do, our thing, and wanted us to race and help us. So, but growing up, that was one of my favorite things, was going to Pacemakers and watching him race. Once I got old enough, Dad got me and my brother junior dragsters. I was the first one to get one, obviously. My brother was a lot younger. At 9 years old, I think, is when I got my first junior dragster, and I started racing it. I can remember my second race. I was out at National Trail Raceway just down the road from here, and in testing the night before, we had made our passes, and we would go all the way to the end of the shutdown. Well, the next day they had us go to a shutdown that was half the distance from the night previous, and they had a guy, he stepped out in front of my car to get me to turn off early, and I flipped on its side, and it was kind of a traumatic experience for a 9-year-old. And I can remember just crying and being so scared that my dad was going to be mad, and he was pretty upset, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I remember he took us home and loaded the car on the trailer, and it was pretty tore up, but it was fixable. And he asked me if I wanted to keep doing it or if I wanted to quit, and I remember thinking about it for a day or so and just crying and being sad, and then finally I decided, I wasn't going to quit. I was going to try it again. I'm glad that I did. And then I think the next race after that, after it got a brand new paint job, I'm pretty sure we took it to Pacemakers and one of the wheels flew off of it the very next race, and I was afraid that I was going to ruin the brand new paint job. I was pretty sure that I was cursed for racing very early on with bad luck. But I kept racing up until I was 16 years old. I got my license, and Dad let me hop in the Nova, and that was one of the best experiences for me. A very nervous experience because I loved the car and I didn't want to mess it up. But I wasn't a great driver starting out. I didn't hop in it, and I wasn't good right away. It took some time, some seat time and experience. After a while, I got pretty good at racing the Nova. I remember I won a couple races. I won a Super Pro race at Pacemakers one night against the track champion, and that was a proud moment for Dad, I think, and it was a cool moment for me and him, being there, for my first win in a real car and doing it in the Nova at Pacemakers at night. It was a cool experience. Through high school, I was starting to get into some trouble with partying and drinking a little bit. Nothing serious, stuff kids do, but can turn serious later on if you don't snap out of it. A lot of my friends, they ended up going to college, and I kind of stayed here. But a lot of those kids, they went and they kept partying and drinking, and it didn't go too good for them. So I guess Dad was right when he decided to get me an S10 to occupy my time. He got me the S10 when I was 15 and a half, and he didn't know that it was supposed to keep me out of trouble. He was just getting me my first vehicle. But about the time I was 17 or 18 and I was partying and drinking and doing what kids do, he really started pressing the issue of building the S10. And I can remember, the first build we did with it, we just had a little 350 small block, and it was stock bottom end. It came out of a Suburban, and we didn't do too much to it. We just put a nitrous kit on it, and I remember we had fired it up in the garage for the first time, and I was so excited to hear it run. And of course, the first time he started it, he goes and he starts purging the nitrous through the engine in the garage, and broke a piston in the garage within about 15 minutes of its first fire up, and that was the first engine that was in the truck. And about 20 engines later, here we are. It just kept progressing and getting faster and faster and faster. And it's like, for me, it's different for some people, but for me, it's never enough. You get used to whatever speed you're going, and it doesn't scare me. I know Dad thinks that's crazy sometimes, or he thinks I'm going to hurt myself, but it's just the way it is. It's what I live for. I live to go fast, and that's, you know, my favorite thing to do. I grew to really love racing and really love the S10. You know, we've been all around the country with it now, and I wouldn't take back the memories for nothing, and I plan to make a whole lot more.